Station Harmony was the most ironic name in the galaxy. For 6 months, the floating diplomatic hub had been anything but harmonious. 3 alien species had been locked in negotiations that made watching paint dry look like an action movie. And the paint was winning. The Kraxan Empire wanted Sector 7. The Tellurian Collective insisted Sector 7 belonged to them according to Treaty Subsection 42-C. The Vorath clans claimed their ancestors had bled on Sector 7's moons 2 centuries ago, which apparently meant something important in their culture. Nobody was budging, nobody was compromising, and everyone was about 30 seconds away from turning this peace summit into a war summit. Ambassador Flynnick, a 4-armed slug-like creature from a neutral species, looked like he'd aged a decade and half a year. His eye stalks drooped with exhaustion, and he'd developed a nervous habit of wringing all 4 hands simultaneously. The poor bastard had been mediating this nightmare since day 1, and it showed. That's when the Galactic Council made a desperate decision. They called in a human. Specifically, they called in Ambassador Jack Riley, a middle-aged guy from Earth, with a reputation for solving impossible diplomatic situations through what official reports politely called unorthodox methods. Unofficial reports used words like insane, reckless, and how is he still alive? Jack arrived on Station Harmony with nothing but a duffel bag and a smile that suggested he either knew something everyone else didn't, or he'd completely lost his mind, possibly both. Flynnick met him at the docking bay, all 4 arms gesturing frantically. Ambassador Riley, thank the stars you're here. I've tried everything. Logic, appeals to mutual benefit, even bribery, though we don't speak of that last one. Relax, Flynnick. Jack clapped the ambassador on what might have been a shoulder. I've read the files. How bad can 3 angry aliens be? Flynnick's eye stalks twisted in what Jack would later learn was the alien equivalent of a laugh. You'll see. The next session starts in 1 hour. I suggest you prepare yourself mentally. Perhaps meditate. Perhaps pray to whatever deities humans believe in. Jack just grinned. I've got something better than prayer, buddy. I've got a plan. That plan was currently sitting in his duffel bag, waiting for the right moment. But first, Jack needed to see exactly what kind of circus he'd walked into. The negotiation chamber was designed for peace. Soft lighting, comfortable seating, a round table that symbolized equality. None of it mattered. The 3 alien delegates had turned it into a verbal battlefield. General Throck of the Kraxan Empire was built like a tank with anger issues. 8 feet of muscle, scales, and bad attitude, with mandibles that clicked menacingly whenever he got irritated. Which was constantly. He'd probably been clicking those mandibles for 6 straight months. Prime. Administrator Quillen represented the Tellurian Collective. Picture a 7-foot praying mantis that discovered bureaucracy and fell in love. She carried no fewer than 4 data pads and interrupted every conversation to cite regulations. Her species communicated through a series of clicks and whistles that the translation software rendered in the most monotone voice imaginable. Warlord Havax of the Vorath clans was the wild card. Humanoid, covered in ceremonial scars, with eyes that blazed like he'd taken personal offense to the concept of compromise. His people valued honor above all else, which meant every disagreement became a potential honor duel. Jack watched from the observation gallery as Flynnick tried to moderate. It went exactly as well as expected. Sector 7 is rightfully Kraxan territory, Throck growled, slamming a fist on the table hard enough to make the datapads jump. We have the military strength to hold it. Point of order, Quillen interjected, mandibles twitching. According to Galactic Treaty 379, military strength does not constitute legal ownership. Furthermore, subsection, my ancestors died on those moons. Havax stood abruptly, hand moving to where a weapon would be if they allowed weapons in peace talks. Their blood sanctifies that land. To deny this is to spit on their graves and insult my entire lineage. I insult your lineage every morning before breakfast, Throck shot back. Then you will meet me in combat, coward. After I crush your homeworld, whelp. Gentlemen, please. Flynnick's voice cracked. All 4 hands were ringing now. We've been over this exact argument 473 times. Can we perhaps try a different approach? The only different approach is warfare, Throck muttered. Quillen clicked disapprovingly. Warfare requires filing a declaration of intent form, which takes minimum 6 weeks to process. Jack had seen enough. He stood up in the gallery and called down. Hey, question. Do any of you actually want Sector 7, or do you just enjoy arguing about it? 3 alien heads swiveled toward him with expressions ranging from confusion to outrage. Flynnick looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Who is this human? Havax demanded. Your new best friend, Jack said, walking down to the main floor. Ambassador Jack Riley, Earth Diplomatic Corps. I'm here to end this before you all die of old age. Or boredom. Whichever comes first. The next morning's session started like all the others. Throck was already growling. Quillen had brought 6 datapads instead of 4. Havax looked like he'd sharpened his honor sometime before breakfast. Jack walked in carrying something none of them had seen before, a small rectangular box. What is that? Quillen asked suspiciously, as if Jack might be smuggling in unauthorized negotiation materials. This, Jack said, placing the box on the table and pulling out a deck of cards, is how we're settling your little dispute. The cards fanned across the table in a smooth arc. 52 pieces of laminated paper with colorful designs. 3 alien faces stared at them like Jack had just dumped a live grenade on the negotiating table. You mock us, Havax said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I'm serious as a heart attack. We're going to play poker. Best 2 out of 3 rounds. Winner gets final say on Sector 7's territorial divisions. The silence that followed could have suffocated a star. Throke's mandibles clicked so fast they blurred. You want us to gamble our empire's future on a human card game? I want you to stop wasting everyone's time. Jack leaned back in his chair. You've been talking for 6 months and gotten nowhere. My way, we're done in 6 hours. Maybe less, if you're quick learners. This is highly irregular, Quillen protested, already pulling up her datapads. There is no precedent in galactic treaty law for resolving territorial disputes through games. Of chance. It's not chance, it's skill. Strategy, reading your opponents. You know, all those things you 3 claim to be good at, but haven't demonstrated once in half a year of pointless arguing. Havax's eyes narrowed. You dare question my strategic capabilities? I'm saying you've been out-strategized by a conference table. The table's winning, Havax. A piece of furniture is beating you. The Vorath warlord's hand twitched. Jack had hit a nerve, and he knew it. Quillen's mandibles clicked in what might have been indignation. Even if we agreed to this absurdity, the rules would need to be codified, verified, and submitted for review. You scared you can't master a simple human game? Jack asked innocently. I mean, the Tellurian collective prides itself on intellectual superiority, right? But if it's too complicated for you. Nothing is too complicated for Tellurian intellect, Quillen snapped, which was probably the first emotional response she'd shown in 6 months. Jack turned to Throck. And you, General. Your people are warriors, brave, fearless. But I guess sitting down to a card game is too scary. Craxon fear nothing. Throck roared, slamming both fists on the table. I will crush this poker of yours like I crush my enemies. Great. So we're doing this? The 3 aliens exchanged glances. They'd been maneuvered, and they knew it. But pride, ego, and 6 months of stalemate had backed them into a corner. One game, Havax said carefully, to prove this is not beneath us. Then we return to proper negotiations. Sure, Jack said, already shuffling the deck with practiced ease. One game. Though I gotta warn you, once you start playing poker, it's hard to stop. Something about the thrill of the bluff, the rush of a good hand, the satisfaction of reading your opponent's tell. Tell? Quillen asked. Oh, you'll see, Jack grinned, dealing the first hand. You'll definitely see. Flynnick, watching from the sidelines, had stopped, wringing his hands. Now he was just praying. To 17 different deities, just to cover his bases. Teaching 3 aliens how to play Texas Hold'em turned out to be easier than getting them to agree on literally anything else, which said more about their negotiating skills than their card-playing abilities. So these chips represent resources, Quillen said, organizing her stack by color and denomination. And the objective is to accumulate the maximum number of chips through strategic betting based on card probability and opponent behavior analysis. Or you can just wing it and hope for the best, Jack said. That works too. Throck held his cards like they'd personally offended him. These symbols mean nothing. How do I know which hand defeats which? Jack slid over a laminated card ranking sheet. Hearts, diamonds, clubs, spades, 2 through ace. Royal flush beats everything. High card loses to everything. You'll figure it out. And what? Havax asked slowly, staring at his cards with intense suspicion. Constitutes honorable play? In poker? Literally nothing. Lying, bluffing, misdirection. It's all fair game. The only rule is don't cheat. Havax looked genuinely disturbed by this concept. You created a game where deception is encouraged? We created a game where everyone knows everyone's probably lying, so you have to figure out who's lying about what. It's basically diplomacy with pictures. Round 1 was a beautiful disaster. Throck bet aggressively on every hand, regardless of what he held. Jack watched him push all his chips in on a pair of threes against a visible straight on the board. "I will not show weakness," the general declared, revealing his losing hand with pride. Quillen treated every decision like it required a committee review. "The probability of improving my hand on the river is approximately 18.4%, however, accounting for opponent betting patterns and chip stack ratios. She'd still be calculating when everyone else had folded." Havax played like every card was a personal insult to his ancestors. He'd fold decent hands because this 7 is unworthy of my attention, then go all in on garbage because the spirits demand I show courage. His strategy was less poker and more interpretive. Dance. Jack won round 1 without breaking a sweat. He'd barely paid attention, honestly. "This game is rigged," Throck grumbled. "This game requires understanding statistical variance within a framework of incomplete information," Quillen protested. "This game has no honor," Havax muttered. "Want to play round 2, or should we go back to arguing about Sector 7 for another 6 months? Jack asked, already shuffling. 3 sets of alien eyes glared at him. Then, reluctantly, they pushed their chips back to the center. Round 2 was different. Throck started actually looking at his cards before betting. Revolutionary concept. He even folded once, grumbling about tactical retreats the whole time. Quillen stopped calculating and started watching. Her mandibles would twitch slightly when she had a good hand. Jack noticed. So did Havax, who called one of her big bets and won with a mediocre pair. And Havax, surprisingly, discovered he had a gift for reading people. Or aliens, whatever. He caught Throck in a bluff, forcing the general to fold kings because Havax had stared him down like he could see his soul. "You had nothing," Throck accused after the hand. "I had enough," Havax replied, a smile tugging at his scarred face. They were actually communicating, talking. Quillen asked Throck why he always clicked his mandibles when nervous. Throck admitted he did the same when excited, so she couldn't use it against him. Havax pointed out that Quillen reorganized her chips when she was about to fold. "That is classified behavioral information," Quillen protested, but she was clicking in what Jack recognized as amusement. The final hand of round 2 came down to Havax and Jack. The human had top pair. Havax had nothing but audacity and a calculated read that Jack wouldn't risk a large bet this early in the round. Havax pushed all in. Jack studied him, then folded. "Nice bluff. Thank you for recognizing skill when you see it," Havax said, raking in the chips with obvious satisfaction. Round 2 went to the Vorath warlord. They were tied, 1-1. Throck cracked his knuckles, a sound like boulders grinding. Round 3. Decides everything. "Yeah," Jack said, dealing the cards with a knowing smile. "Everything." Round 3 started with an energy that hadn't existed in the negotiation chamber for 6 months. All 3 aliens leaned forward, studying their cards with genuine focus. The trash talk had evolved from threats of planetary annihilation to accusations of poor bluffing technique. Progress. Jack dealt himself in but played like he'd forgotten how poker worked. He folded good hands, bet weakly on decent ones, and generally made himself irrelevant to the outcome. Because this round wasn't about him winning. It was about them figuring out they already knew how to solve their problem. The key hand developed 20 minutes in. Throck had a strong starting hand, kings in the pocket. Quillen held queen-jack suited, drawing to a straight. Havax had absolute garbage but position and attitude. The flop came down. 10, queen, ace, rainbow suits. Throck bet heavy, confident in his kings. Quillen smooth called, calculating odds. Havax raised, representing the ace. "You don't have the ace," Throck growled. "Prove it," Havax challenged. Here's where it got interesting. Throck looked at Quillen. "What are you drawing to?" In 6 months of negotiation, Throck had never asked Quillen a direct question about her position. Now he needed to know if she was a threat to them both. Quillen's mandibles twitched. She could lie. Instead, she said, "Straight draw, 8 outs, approximately 32% chance of hitting by the river. You're giving him information?" Havax protested. "I'm establishing transparent communication to facilitate optimal decision-making," Quillen replied. Then, after a pause, "Also, you're both betting like you want to eliminate each other, and I benefit from you destroying your chip stacks fighting." Throck's mandibles clicked the amused click. "Clever. We could split this pot," Havax suggested suddenly. "If Throck and I both check, we minimize risk while controlling Quillen's aggression." "That's collusion," Jack pointed out mildly. also known as negotiation. The turn card came, a jack. Quillen had hit her straight. She bet moderately. Not enough to scare them off, but enough to build the pot. Throck studied her, then looked at Havax. If I fold, you'll go after her pot alone. If you call, we both lose, Havax countered. Unless we agree to check down the river and let the best hand win honestly. You're asking me to trust you won't bet if you improve? Throck asked incredulously. I'm asking if you value winning this hand more than eliminating me from the game. Throck thought about it. Really thought about it. What do you offer in exchange for this trust? Information. I don't have the ace. I have King 9 offsuit. I'm representing strength I don't possess. Dead silence. Havax had just shown his cards, metaphorically and literally. He'd made himself vulnerable to make a deal. Throke slowly nodded. I call her bet. We check the river. Agreed? Agreed. The river was a blank. Both aliens checked. Quillen revealed her straight and took the pot, but Throck and Havax had maintained their stacks. They'd negotiated a compromise in the middle of a poker hand. Jack let them play 3 more hands before he set down his cards and said, So, about Sector 7. They all looked at him like they'd forgotten where they were. You 3 just spent the last hour doing exactly what you claimed was impossible. Throck, you shared information with former enemies. Quillen, you made decisions based on incomplete data and gut instinct. Havax, you showed vulnerability to build an alliance. You negotiated. You compromised. You worked together. All without anyone threatening to glass a homeworld. Quillen's mandibles froze mid-click. This was a social engineering exercise. This was poker, Jack corrected. But yeah, also that. See, here's the thing about territorial disputes. They're not actually about territory. They're about pride, fear, and the inability to back down without losing face. Poker gives you an excuse. You're not surrendering Sector 7. You're making a strategic play based on available resources and opponent positioning. Throck leaned back, his massive frame somehow looking less threatening. The Kraxan Empire could accept a resource-sharing agreement if proper military considerations were addressed. The Tellurian Collective requires regulatory oversight, Quillen added, but could cede primary administrative control in exchange for economic participation. The Vorath clans must have cultural sites preserved, Havax said quietly. Our ancestors' honor demands recognition, not control. Jack spread his hands. So split it. Military protection by Kraxan, administrative management by Tellurian, cultural preservation by Vorath. You each get what you actually need instead of fighting over who gets everything. The 3 aliens looked at each other. Really looked, maybe for the first time in 6 months. That could work, Throck admitted. It's equitable, Quillen agreed. It honors all parties. Havax nodded. Flennick, who'd been watching with all 4 hands covering his face, slowly lowered them. Are you saying you've reached an agreement? We're saying we need to negotiate the details. Quillen corrected. But yes, the framework is acceptable. Jack gathered up his cards. Great. You 3 hash out the specifics. I'm going to get some coffee. Or whatever passes for coffee on this station. 1 week later, Jack stood in the same negotiation chamber watching 3 alien delegates sign the Sector 7 Accord. The document was 70 pages long because Quillen had insisted on proper formatting, but the core agreement fit on 1 page. Shared governance, mutual respect, nobody glassing anybody's planet. Flennick looked like he'd shed 20 years and gained back his will to live. All 4 arms were gesturing enthusiastically as he prepared the official transmissions to the Galactic Council. Remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. 6 months of deadlock resolved in 1 week. 1 week and 1 poker game, Throck corrected. The general had actually smiled during the final negotiation session. Jack hadn't known Kraxan faces could do that. I've drafted a preliminary framework for regular diplomatic poker sessions, Quillen announced, because of course she had. Structured games could facilitate ongoing negotiations on trade agreements, border disputes, and cultural exchange programs. My people would find honor in the set-end. Such contests, Havax added. He'd stopped threatening duels 3 days ago. New personal record. The signing ceremony concluded with what humans would call a photo op, and what the galaxy called a historical documentation moment. 3 former enemies standing together, looking almost friendly. Flennick managed to get in the frame despite his shorter stature. Jack was packing his duffel bag when Havax approached. Ambassador Riley, I have a question. Shoot. How did you know this would work? The cards, the game. You gambled the peace of 3 civilizations on a human recreational activity. Throke and Quillen had gathered closer, clearly interested in the answer. Jack zipped up his bag and slung it over his shoulder. Here's the thing about humans. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy. Not the smartest, not the most advanced. But we spent about 10,000 years figuring out how to sit around tables with people we absolutely hated and somehow not kill each other. That's diplomacy, Quillen observed. That's poker, Jack countered. Same skill set, different stakes. We perfected the art of sitting around a table, lying to each other's faces, reading body language, making deals, breaking deals, and somehow walking away as friends. Or at least not enemies. We call it diplomacy when it's official, and poker when it's not, but it's the same game. You weaponized a card game, Throck said, sounding impressed. I gave you a different table. Your old one wasn't working. Needed something where losing didn't feel like surrender and winning didn't require destroying the other guy. Poker's perfect for that. Everybody loses sometimes. Everybody wins sometimes. And the game keeps going. Jack headed for the docking bay, then paused at the door. Oh, and one more thing. Havax, you've got to tell. You touch your left scar when you're bluffing. Might want to work on that. The Vorath warlord's hand froze halfway to his face. Behind him, Throke's mandibles clicked in. Amusement, and Quillen's translator rendered something that might have been a laugh. Jack grinned and left them to it. 3 days later, Station Harmony's observation deck had been converted into a regular poker night. The Sector 7 dispute was settled, but the game had taken on a life of its own. Throck, Quillen, and Havax sat around a table with Flennick and 2 other diplomats who'd heard about the legendary piece through Poker Summit. I raise, Throck announced, pushing chips forward. Statistically inadvisable given visible cards. Quillen noted, then called anyway. Your ancestors would be proud of that bluff, Havax said, folding his hand. And somewhere between the chips, the cards, and the banter, 3 species that had nearly gone to war were actually becoming something resembling friends. The game continued. The peace held, and in the end, that's all poker ever was. A bunch of people at a table, trying to figure out if they could trust each other enough to make it to the next hand. Turns out that's not a bad foundation for galactic diplomacy either.